Little black girl begs bikers to hide her from dad. What they found in her bag is shocking. You know how some stories grab you by the throat from the very first moment. This one did. And not because of the bikers, or even the father, but because of what they found inside that little girl's bag. Picture this, a dusty back road, sun bleeding low over the tree line, and the sound of motorcycle engines cutting through the quiet like thunder. That's when she appeared, a girl small, barefoot, her dress stained with dirt and hair streaking her cheeks. She didn't hesitate, didn't even glance at the size of the bikes roaring toward her. She just ran straight into the middle of the road and begged them to stop, and when they did, she dropped to her knees, clutching a frayed backpack like it was her last lifeline, whispering through sobs, "Please hide me. Don't let my dad find me. Now, bikers." They've seen a lot. Fistfights, betrayal, brothers lost to bad decisions. But nothing makes a room go quiet faster than a kid in trouble. Right away, instincts kicked in. These weren't strangers she ran to. They were her last hope. At first, they thought it was the usual story, a rough home, maybe an argument that spiraled too far. But then they noticed the way she held that bag. Not just close protective, like a secret she couldn't let slip. When one of them finally asked what was inside, her reaction was instant. Eyes wide, hands tightening until her knuckles went white. She shook her head violently, tears spilling harder. That bag wasn't just belongings, it was evidence. Proof, a truth too heavy for a child to carry. And that's when the bikers realized this wasn't about a runaway girl. This was about something darker. Something that had to be stopped. Because the father she was so desperate to escape, he wasn't just strict. He wasn't just angry. He was the kind of man who could look his own child in the eyes and make her believe running barefoot into traffic was safer than going home with him. And you know what happened next. Her bag changed everything. It cracked open a truth that made even the toughest bikers take a step back. This story isn't about petty drama. It isn't about discipline gone too far. It's about fear so deep a little girl would rather trust strangers on motorcycles than her own blood. It's about betrayal at the level of family, the very people meant to protect you. And it's about what happens when men and women who live by a code of loyalty and justice decide they've had enough, because make no mistake, justice here wasn't served. It was carved out with precision, cold, calculated, and unforgettable. And if you think you know how this ends, I promise you don't. Hey, if you love stories where justice isn't just served, it's chilled and plated with silver, please hit subscribe. These videos take hours of writing, editing, and emotional recovery from second-hand rage, so your support seriously means the world. The ride had started like any other. Sun on Crow, engines low and steady. A line of bikers rolling down a country back road after a long day of raising money for the local food bank. They weren't saints, sure, but they knew how to give back. And after hours of shaking hands and grilling burgers, this was the part they lived for. The open stretch, the wind, the feeling of freedom you can't buy. Then came the girl, out of nowhere. She darted from the trees, barefoot, thin legs pumping through the dust. Her little dress clung with sweat and dirt, and her eyes wild, terrified, locked straight onto the riders. For a split second, everyone thought it was a mirage, some child chasing fireflies or playing too close to the road. But then she planted herself dead center in their path, arms flung wide. They braked hard, rubber screaming against gravel. The line of bikes staggered to a stop just feet from her. And before anyone could even kill their engines, the girl collapsed to her knees. "Please," she cried, voice cracking. "Please hide me. Don't let my dad find me. I don't care how tough you are." Hearing that will punch a hole straight through your chest. The riders exchanged quick, unsettled glances. These were men and women who'd stared down bar fights and worse without flinching. But this, a child begging strangers to save her from her own father, that rattled them in a way fists never could. The girl's name was Amara. She couldn't have been more than 9, maybe 10. tiny frame too small for the kind of fear she carried. Her arms clutched a faded backpack like it was fused to her body. Not just holding it, defending it. One of the bikers, a woman named Roxy, crouched down, keeping her voice soft. "Hey, sweetheart. You're safe. Nobody's gonna hurt you." But Amara flinched, backing up a step, eyes darting toward the trees. She whispered so low, they almost missed it. "He's coming." And that one sentence made the hair on every biker's neck stand up. What kind of father makes his child so desperate she'd rather throw herself into the arms of strangers than go home? What kind of man does that? The leader, a broad-shouldered guy everyone called Bear, stepped forward. His tone was steady, calm, but beneath it was a steel edge. "You're safe now. Nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go." Amara's hands tightened on the straps of her backpack until her knuckles went white. Roxy reached out gently, trying to ease the weight of her shoulders. But Amara shook her head violently, clutching it tighter. "No, don't touch it. Please." That pack wasn't just a bag. It was her shield, her secret. Whatever was inside, it mattered enough to risk everything. The bikers didn't push. They knew better than to corner a wounded animal. And that's exactly what this little girl looked like, cornered, trembling, fighting to protect the last thing she had left for a long beat. All anyone heard was the tick of cooling engines and the rasp of Amara's breathing. Then Bear motioned for two of the riders to fan out, keeping an eye on the tree line, because if her father really was close, this moment was about to get ugly. And here's the thing, you could feel it. The air was thick with it. This wasn't some family argument. This was something darker. You could see it in the way Amara's eyes darted, the way she hugged that bag like a lifeline. The bikers didn't need every detail. They just knew one truth. No child should ever look that afraid of going home. So, right then and there, they made a silent pact. Whoever this father was, whatever he had done, he wasn't getting her back. Not tonight. What would you have done if a terrified child begged you to hide them? The girl wouldn't let go of that backpack. Not when Bear tried to calm her. Not when Roxy gently offered to carry it. Not even when the others promised her she was safe now. Her little fingers dug into the fabric like it was her only anchor in the world. For a while, they let it go. The priority was calming her down, making sure she knew nobody was going to hand her back to the man she feared. But the longer they sat there, the more obvious it became. Whatever was inside that bag was the reason she ran. Bear crouched to her level, voice low, steady. "Sweetheart, nobody's gonna take it from you, but maybe you can help us understand." "What's in the bag?" Her eyes darted up, big, brown, wide with fear. She shook her head, hugging it closer. "He'll kill me if I tell, and that made every rider within earshot tense. The kind of tense that comes before a fight. Roxy glanced at Bear, her jaw tight. She'd heard kids say, "I'll get in trouble" before. But "he'll kill me," that's not a phrase a 9-year-old invents. That's a phrase learned by repetition. They didn't push. They gave her space, letting her sit near the bikes while the others fanned out. Engines ticking in the cooling air, cicadas humming in the distance. Everyone listening for footsteps that, thankfully, never came. Finally, when the silence had stretched too long, Amara's little hands loosened. She fumbled with the zipper, hesitant. Like she was about to open a coffin, the first thing she put out was harmless enough. A crumpled notebook. Its pages were filled with childish handwriting, little sketches of houses and stick figures. Then came a folded sheet of paper schoolwork, graded but never signed. But beneath that, things shifted. A wad of crumpled bills, wrapped in an elastic band that looked far too neat for a child to have managed. Several old photographs creased, smudged, and chilling in their detail. One showed Amara with a bruise on her cheek, the kind of mark you don't get from tripping over a toy. Another, a blurry shot of her father yelling, fist raised. Someone must have taken it in secret. Then came the letters, tucked in the bottom, written in her father's sharp, angry scrawl. Demands, threats, Words like obedience and punishment. Words that no child should ever read from their parent. Roxy reached forward, her voice softer now. Honey, who took these pictures? Amara's lip trembled. Me. I used his phone. Before he saw, that's when it sank in. This wasn't just a scared kid with a rough home life. This was a child gathering evidence against her own father. A child who knew that if she didn't keep proof, no one would believe her. And when Bear asked the question, the one they were all thinking, the room, if you can call it that stretch of roadside a room, went cold. Why'd you run today, Amara? She swallowed hard, her small voice barely carrying. Because he found the bag, he said. He said next time, he'd make sure I couldn't tell anybody anything. There it was. The betrayal laid bare. The man meant to protect her had become the monster she feared most. Now, I know what you're thinking, why not go straight to the cops? But here's the thing. These bikers had seen too many cases where the law looked away, where a smooth-talking parent walked into court with a clean shirt and a fake smile and convinced everyone the kid was exaggerating. And looking at Amara trembling, clutching her bag like her life depended on it, they knew one thing. They couldn't risk handing her back until they were sure. Bear's voice cut through the heavy silence. Nobody's gonna hurt you again. You hear me? Not while we're here for the first time. Amber's grip on the bag loosened just enough to let Roxy slide an arm around her. And in that tiny, fragile moment, the bikers weren't just riders anymore. They were her shield. Do you think the bikers should have gone straight to the cops or trusted their own gut first? The quiet hum of engines and cicadas broke first when a car's tires crunched on the gravel. At first, no one thought much of it. Back roads attract all kinds of traffic. But then the vehicle stopped a short distance from the group, and the door slammed. The air shifted. A man stepped out tall, broad-shouldered, his movements sharp and measured, the kind that make you feel the world bends around him. He scanned the area, eyes locking on the bikes and the small figure nearby. His voice cut through the evening like a whip. Amara. The girl stiffened, pressed herself against Roxy without thinking, clutching her backpack like it was a shield. And that's when the bikers knew this wasn't just a dad coming to retrieve a runaway. This was a man used to being obeyed, used to being feared. Bear's jaw tightened. Stay calm. Let's see what he does first. The father's footsteps were deliberate, each one echoing of the dirt and trees. He stopped a few yards away, hands on hips, eyes narrowing. I know you're here. I know she's with you. His voice wasn't raised, but every syllable dripped with control. Threat. Give her back. Now. Roxy stepped subtly in front of Amara. She's safe. Nobody's taking her anywhere. The father's gaze shifted, landing on the small backpack. His face darkened, shadows etching lines of anger. He took a step closer. What's in that bag? I told you not to touch my things. Amara shrank behind Roxy, whispering, Don't let him. That was enough for Bear to make a decision. He motioned for two riders to circle, blocking sight lines, ensuring escape routes. Loyalty wasn't just a word here, it was action. And right now, it was put to the test. The man's hand twitched toward his coat, subtle but deliberate. One rider whispered, Gun? Another shook their head slightly. Not sure. But tension curled thick in the air, tight as the backpack in Amara's hands. And then the man spoke again, slower this time, venom thick in each word. You think hiding her from me will help her? She's mine. She belongs to me. Nobody tells me what to do with my daughter. The words hung heavy, sickeningly casual. Control masquerading as ownership. And the bikers, despite all their confidence, felt it the weight of a man who saw fear as obedience. Amara's lips trembled. She whispered under her breath, He's dangerous. Bear's gaze met Roxy's, and in that moment, they understood. This was bigger than a runaway kid, bigger than a scared girl clutching a bag. This man wasn't just abusive, he had ties, influence, maybe even connections that could bury anyone who crossed him. A shiver ran through the group. They weren't cowards, not by a long shot. But some situations demand more than courage. They demand calculation. The father's eyes scanned each biker, assessing, threatening, sizing up who could be bent, who would break. I don't know what games you think you're playing. Give her back, now. Or didn't finish the threat. He didn't have to. The implication was enough. Every rider felt it escalate, and this could turn lethal in seconds. Amara pressed closer to Roxy, backpack pressed to her chest like armor. One of the younger bikers whispered, "This ain't just about a little girl anymore. This is about stopping a monster." And that's when the night shifted, from a tense standoff to a moment that demanded strategy, not speed. Every biker's mind raced, weighing options. Do we confront him now and risk a fight? Or do we wait, watch, and use what we know to outsmart him? The father took a step back, a subtle pause that betrayed impatience. Then another glance toward the trees, suspicion flickering across his face. "I'll be back," he said, voice low but sharp. "And you'd better have her ready." And just like that, he was gone. Tires crunching, leaving only dust, tension, and the faintest echo of danger hanging in the air. Amara exhaled shakily, still clutching the bag. Bear lowered his voice, firm but gentle. "You're safe for now. But we've got work to do." Roxy brushed a loose strand of hair from Amara's face. "I promise, kid. Nobody's hurting you again. Not while we're here." The group exhaled as a unit, but the adrenaline didn't fade. Not yet. Not with the knowledge that the man who should have protected this child had become her greatest threat. And in that moment, every biker understood the unspoken truth. This wasn't about charity rides or camaraderie anymore. This was personal. This was war in miniature. If you were the bikers, would you have confronted him right then and there or waited? After the father's car disappeared down the gravel road, the bikers huddled together, the cool night air sharp against their skin. Engines idled, tires still warm, but no one touched them. This wasn't a ride anymore. This was a situation that demanded patience, and patience wasn't exactly a biker's natural state. Bear leaned back against his bike, hands folded. "We can't just wait for him to come back. She's not safe until we know we've got every angle covered." Roxy nodded, voice low but firm. "We need info. Everything. Where he goes, who he talks to, what he's capable of." And just like that, the plan began, not a rash act of anger, not some impulsive roadside confrontation. This was strategy. This was cold. This was justice. They started small, quietly. Surveillance from a distance, observing his house, noting the comings and goings. Photos, license plates, timing of departures. Every detail logged. Every pattern analyzed. They weren't trying to play cops. They were building leverage, assembling a map of his life that no one could ignore. Meanwhile, they tapped into community contacts, local shopkeepers, delivery drivers, even neighbors who kept their eyes open for trouble. Nothing was off limits. But they moved carefully, always mindful of Amara. She wasn't a piece in their puzzle, she was the reason they were willing to stare down danger. And then came the digging. Financial records, past disputes, rumors whispered at the edge of town. They found debts he'd neglected to disclose, deals that skirted legality, and the faint outline of criminal associations. Nothing overtly explosive yet, but enough to know he had skeletons, lots of them. Enough to build a case that would stand, rather than collapse like cheap plywood. They split tasks naturally. Roxy focused on Amara, keeping her calm, engaged, even laughing sometimes, because fear left space for mistakes. Bear and the others handled the outside work, watching, recording, piecing together a portrait of a man who looked normal to the casual observer, but beneath the surface, rotted. Amara, meanwhile, learned to trust not fully, not yet, but enough to confide in small ways. She told them about the little threats, the controlling behavior, the hours of isolation, the way he'd yell over the smallest things. Every story, every detail became part of the larger picture. And every time she spoke, The bikers scribbled, recorded, memorized. One night, around a campfire near their makeshift safe spot, Bear exhaled smoke and muttered, "This isn't about anger. It's about him facing what he's done. And it's gonna take patience." Roxy gave him a sideways glance. "Patience is a luxury we don't get to afford forever. But you're right. We can't let him know we're moving too fast. He's slippery, and that's when strategy met creativity." They began setting subtle traps, observing his patterns, predicting his movements, and leaving breadcrumbs just enough to confirm suspicions, but never enough to alert him to their full plan. They leveraged allies, people who owed favors, people with no love lost for him, people who saw a child in danger and were ready to act. Each piece fit like a jagged puzzle, forming a deadly perfect picture. Every night, the bikers would gather, review their intel, and plan the next move. Maps spread across the hoods of bikes, notes in notebooks, phone records cross-referenced with observations. Every lead was double-checked. Mistakes weren't an option. Amara's safety was the only rule. Amara, clutching her backpack, watched in quiet fascination. It wasn't play, it was education in vigilance, in justice. She saw adults moving with intention, not impulse. And slowly, she began to realize something she hadn't before. The world could be cruel, but it could also protect you if the right people were willing to fight for you. Weeks passed. Patterns confirmed. Evidence stacked. The father made missteps, small, careless, confident that no one was watching. And that's when the bikers struck mentally, not physically. They knew where to strike if it came to confrontation. But more importantly, they had the law and the community on their side before they ever did. Bear, pacing near the fire, finally said, "We're ready. Not for war yet, but we're ready to make him face the truth." Roxy nodded, tucking Amara into a jacket to ward off the night chill. "We're not doing this for revenge. We're doing it for her. Every move is about her safety and his accountability. Nothing personal, just justice. And that was the difference. Cold planning, precision, patience. No yelling, no impulse, no unnecessary risk. Every action, every choice was calculated. The father didn't know it yet, but he had painted himself into a corner, and when the time came, there would be no running, no manipulation, no hiding behind charm or money or fear. Every lie, every threat, every bruise would be exposed. The night closed in around them, quiet except for the crackle of the fire and the soft whine of distant traffic. But in that quiet, the bikers felt the simmering power of preparation, the satisfaction of a plan so meticulous it would leave their target no escape. Bear's voice broke the silence, low and steady. "Tomorrow, we start closing the net. Slowly, carefully, but nothing slips. We've got the advantage now. Don't forget it." And in that moment, they all understood the truth. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about balance. About a little girl finally getting what she deserved: protection, respect, and the chance to grow without fear. Because karma doesn't always arrive in a flashy, cinematic moment. Sometimes it moves quietly, slowly, strategically, and when it finally lands, it lands hard. What's your favorite example of karma coming full circle? Let's hear your stories. The morning was quiet, deceptively so. Birds chirped. The sun draped a golden haze over the small town square, and Amara clutched her backpack like a talisman. She wasn't smiling. Not yet. But there was a spark in her eyes, a fragile, fierce spark that said she was ready to be heard. The bikers assembled nearby, blending in with the crowd that had gathered for the local weekend market. No one knew they were there for justice. That was the point. Patience had led them here. Strategy had led them here. And now it was time for truth to speak louder than fear. From a distance, the father appeared. Sharp suit, perfect hair, all the outward signs of control and confidence. He strode through the crowd, nodding at neighbors, smiling at friends, acting like the doting dad, the respectable man. But the bikers had seen past the fard, and so had Amara. Bear leaned down, voice low but firm. Remember, kid, your voice matters. Just tell it like it happened. Amara swallowed hard. I can do it, she whispered. Roxy gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. You can. We've got you. The father's attention was elsewhere, and for a brief moment, Amara's confidence solidified. She stepped forward, backpack clutched to her chest, and lifted her voice. You lied. You hurt me. You told everyone I was making things up. Her voice cracked, high and trembling, but it carried. Heads turned. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People paused mid-step, mid-conversation. The father froze. That controlled, composed expression wavered for the first time. What are you talking about, Amara? He asked, voice tight. The little girl lifted the first photo from her bag, hands shaking slightly, but unwavering. This, and these letters. You said I would get in trouble if I told the truth. You said nobody would believe me. But everyone is here now. Bear and the bikers moved subtly, ensuring no one could block her view. No one could intimidate her. The crowd began to close in, curious, murmuring, some pulling out phones. The father's composure started to crumble. That's not true. He snapped, voice rising. You're lying. You're twisting things. Amara swallowed, heart hammering. No, I'm not. You hit me. You threatened me. And you tried to make me hide the proof so nobody would ever know. This is real, a neighbor gasped. Another stepped closer. Whispers turned into voices. People who had once smiled at him now frowned. Some scanned the bikers, unsure at first. But the proof was there. The photos, the letters, the money stashed to control her everything spoke louder than charm or fear. The father's jaw tightened. He glanced around, saw the shift. Community eyes that once deferred to him now weighed him with suspicion. His voice faltered. You don't understand. Bear stepped forward, calm but commanding. We understand perfectly. And so does she. He gestured to Amara. Every word she just spoke. True. And we've been watching, documenting, making sure she stays safe. You've crossed lines. And now everyone knows it. The crowd leaned in. Phones lifted. Someone called local authorities. Whispers turned into questions. Why didn't anyone stop him before? How long has this been going on? Amara's voice grew steadier. Fear remained, but courage outweighed it. I'm done hiding. I'm done being scared. I deserve to be safe. And everyone here deserves to know the truth about you. The father's face went pale. His mask of control shattered. He tried to raise his voice, but no one was listening. The law, the community, the bikers, even casual onlookers, they all had eyes on him now, and every lie, every denial fell flat. Roxy stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Amara's shoulder. You did it. You told the truth. Bear's eyes never left the father. No more threats. No more fear. It ends here, and it did. Slowly, the father's presence lost its gravity. He muttered, sputtered, and finally retreated, leaving the crowd buzzing with disbelief, sympathy for Amara, and quiet admiration for the bikers who had orchestrated the confrontation. Amara exhaled, shaky but triumphant. She had spoken, and for the first time in her life, the weight of fear lifted, even if just a little. The bikers gathered around her, protective, proud, and silently acknowledging the victory that was as much hers as it was theirs. The community began to act. Neighbors checked on her, authorities opened inquiries, and the father's sphere of influence crumbled piece by piece. Exposure had done what words alone could not. And for Amara, it wasn't vengeance, it was freedom. The bikers didn't celebrate. They didn't need to. The world had already taken note. Justice, quiet but unrelenting, had arrived, and as the crowd dispersed, phones still buzzing with evidence and conversation, Bear muttered to Roxy, low enough for only her to hear. Some people can't change. Some things only get fixed when the truth's out in the open, Roxy nodded. And some monsters. They learn too late. Amara, holding her backpack, walked past the father without looking back. For the first time, She felt the weight lift from her small shoulders. Courage, truth, and community had converged in a single defining moment. Do you think people like this can change, or is exposure the only answer? By morning, the town had shifted. Not visibly, shops still opened. Dogs still barked. Kids still ran through sprinklers, but underneath the familiar rhythms, everything had changed. The father's reputation was in tatters. Conversations that had once praised his name now whispered caution, disbelief, anger. Allies he had relied on drifted away. Unsure how to face a man exposed so completely, news traveled fast. Photos of bruises, copies of letters, evidence meticulously collected by the bikers, it all found its way into the hands of authorities. One by one, doors closed in his favor, and the power he had wielded so casually crumbled. The law, finally alerted, acted with surprising speed. Arrests were considered, charges discussed, investigations opened, and for once, the man who had made fear his language had no control. Amara, meanwhile, clutched her backpack tighter than ever. But now it wasn't just a talisman of fear, it was a shield, a repository of truth, a reminder that she had survived. What had once been a burden, a source of terror, had transformed into protection. Each page, each photo, each folded note was proof that she mattered, that her voice had weight. And weight, in the hands of the right people, could move mountains. Bear and the bikers didn't leave her side. They didn't need to hold her hand constantly, but their presence was steady, reassuring. They weren't family by blood, but they were a kind of family that mattered. The kind that shows up when the world turns against you. The kind that doesn't flinch when someone's trying to make a child disappear. Roxy crouched beside Amber one afternoon, brushing dust from her dress. "You know," she said gently, "sometimes family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up when you're running barefoot for your life." Amara blinked, then smiled, a small, fragile thing, but genuine. She had survived, yes, but more importantly, she had learned something rare. Trust could be earned. Protection could come in unexpected forms. And courage wasn't just facing danger, it was having the right people behind you when you did. The father's absence was felt even in the air. There was no strut, no sharp gaze, no whispered threats, just silence, a vacuum that underscored the power of exposure. People who had once feared him began to speak openly, to help the little girl rebuild the edges of her fractured life. Neighbors dropped by, offering meals, advice, support, and the bikers, ever vigilant, reminded her that safety wasn't a privilege, it was something earned, fought for, and protected fiercely. At night, around a small fire near their temporary safe spot, the bikers reviewed the evidence one last time. Everything was documented, accounted for, ready should the authorities need it. But more than that, it was a testament to Amara's bravery, to their patience, to justice done without vengeance. Bear's voice cut softly through the crackle of flames. "She's safe now. That's all that matters," Roxy added, "and we'll make sure she stays that way." Always, Amara listened quietly, her small hands folded in her lap, the backpack resting beside her. She didn't need to speak. The weight she had carried alone for so long was shared now. The terror that had once paralyzed her had been replaced with a cautious confidence. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it doesn't come with dramatic confrontations or explosions of fury. Sometimes it arrives quietly, steadily, like the sun pushing through clouds after a storm. And sometimes it comes in the form of people who refuse to let a child face monsters alone. For Amara, that was the truth. Her world had been small, frightening, and lonely. Now it was bigger, safer, and filled with people who had chosen to stand by her. Her story, once one of fear and betrayal, had been rewritten. And though the scars remained, so did the knowledge that courage, truth, and a few brave strangers could change everything. Sometimes family isn't who you're born to, it's who shows up when you're running barefoot for your life. Months passed, and the world, slowly, began to feel safe again. Amara had found a new rhythm, days filled with school, laughter, and quiet evenings where she could curl up with a book without constantly looking over her shoulder. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Her placement wasn't perfect, few things in life ever are, but it was loving. Relatives stepped in, understanding more than most adults ever could. And the bikers, they remained in the background, a watchful, steady presence. Not to smother her, not to remind her of danger, but to remind her that someone would always be on her side. Emma began noticing the little joys again. The smell of morning pancakes, the sound of leaves crunching under sneakers, the simple satisfaction of completing a puzzle on her own. Her laughter, once rare and cautious, returned in bursts that caught everyone off guard. Even Roxy admitted she hadn't heard a laugh like that in months. It was pure, unguarded, and unapologetically hers. The backpack, once a symbol of fear, was now tucked away on a shelf. Its contents had been archived, photographed, and handed over to the authorities. But it no longer held power over her. Now, it was a quiet reminder of how far she had come and how fiercely people had fought to ensure she could get here. Bear leaned back against his bike one afternoon, watching her run through the yard with a paper airplane in hand. "You know," he said to Roxy, voiced low, "I thought we were doing this for justice. Turns out we were doing it for her future." Roxy nodded, a small smile tagging at her lips. Sometimes that's the real victory. Not the punishment, not the exposure, but giving a kid the chance to just breathe. And that's exactly what Amara did. She breathed deeply, without fear, without the constant weight of someone else's anger pressing on her chest. Each day, she added a little more confidence, a little more trust, a little more laughter. Each small victory mattered, every question asked without hesitation, every hand held without fear. Every morning, she woke up knowing she was safe. The bikers didn't need fanfare. They didn't need medals or headlines. Their satisfaction came from seeing her thrive, from knowing that their patience, strategy, and quiet courage had rewritten the narrative. The man who had once threatened her, controlled her, and tried to bury the truth was gone, not with violence, but with accountability. And in the quiet moments, late at night when the wind whispered through the trees and the world felt like it might be calm for a while, the bikers reflected on what they had done. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It wasn't flashy or loud or satisfying in the way movies make it seem. It was precise, deliberate, and fueled by care. They had protected someone who had no one else. Bear exhaled, watching a firefly hover near Amara's window. "Justice isn't always about punishment," he said softly. "Sometimes it's about protection. Sometimes it's about showing up when no one else will," Roxy added, almost whispering. "And sometimes that quiet protection is all it takes to let someone breathe free." Amara, tucked in bed that night, didn't know the weight of what had been done for her. She only knew that she was safe, that tomorrow she could laugh again, that the world, while imperfect, had room for kindness, and that she had people who would fight for her, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The past lingered, of course. Memories don't vanish overnight, but fear had loosened its grip. Pain had softened into resilience, and her courage had grown into a quiet, unshakable strength. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it doesn't come with dramatic confrontations or headlines. Sometimes it comes in the form of people who refuse to let a child face monsters alone, and sometimes that's enough to change everything. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet protection that lets someone finally breathe free. By the time the dust settled, the world had shifted quietly but decisively. Amara was safe. Her backpack, once heavy with fear, now carried proof of courage. The father, the man who had once commanded obedience through intimidation, was left facing the consequences of his own actions. His power had crumbled, and the very people who once enabled him had turned away. The bikers stood tall, not as heroes seeking praise, but as guardians who understood that strength isn't always measured in fists or fire. Real strength, they proved, comes from loyalty, patience, and the willingness to stand up with others against cruelty, even when the odds feel impossible. They didn't just protect a child, they restored her chance at life, at joy, at freedom. And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it doesn't come wrapped in dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it arrives in quiet courage, in community, in the people willing to show up when the world turns its back. And for Amara, those people were the difference between fear and hope. If you found this story as gripping as I did, please hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe. These scripts take hours to research, write, and edit, and your support means we can keep bringing you the stories that remind us why justice matters. Remember, sometimes it's the quiet battles, the ones fought with care, courage, and community that leave the deepest marks. And sometimes those are the battles that truly win.